you can write, syntax of it, how it all works together. And then we'll talk about some best practices and wrap up. I'm going to save the last 10-15 minutes to talk about the exam too. So I won't forget to do that. Cool. Let's crush through some query writing real quick. If this goes a bit fast, it's not because I'm trying to rush you here. It's just because I know this is new. So it's just going to take some practice to do. But let's write some queries together, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Let me get through here. Cool. Queries. Let's do it. I'm going to go back and forth a lot between the slides and the playground. There's not really labs for this module. It's more just like do it as we go through it. So please feel free to do it with me if you want some practice. There's not going to be like a lab portion at the end of this module. So let's talk about queries. At the query root, you have a site. Anytime that you're querying on a collection of things, in this case, we're querying on products, you have a site. Earlier, when I ran this query, I didn't write site because I'm not querying on a collection of things. I'm just querying on the one customer who's logged in, Ben, right? So I didn't need to put site at the root. But anytime that you're asking for multiple things or a collection of things, you will have site. And in this case, we're asking for products. We'll talk about edges and nodes in a second, but mostly the takeaway here is edges have two things in them. One, they have nodes. You can see that here. Two, they have cursors. We'll talk about cursors and pagination in a bit, but cursors are how you kind of move through a list of objects. So edges have cursors, they have nodes. We'll get to cursors, but nodes handle these specific attributes that we're querying on. So looking at what we have here, we're using site because we're querying on a collection. We have our edges, which contain our node and our cursor. And then in our node, we're saying, give us the name of each individual product. So on this collection of products, we want the name of each of them. So if we're going to build something like this, and we can do this, if you want to follow along with me, go ahead and just give yourself a fresh tab over here. We can start writing in here query. You'll also notice whenever you start to type in the playground, it will auto adjust or autofill what you think that it wants. You can just hit enter and it'll start to autofill. Query, I'm going to do site. I'm going to do products, edges, and node. That's where we start. Now, in terms of what we want for these products, name was one that was in the example. We could do SKU. If you're curious about what all is available here, I think there's a shortcut. Yeah. If you hit Control and then space bar, so Control space, this shows me everything that I could ask for. So do I want the SKU? Do I want the description? Do I want the brand? The variants, right? The images. There's a number of things I can ask for here. Remember, that's just Control spacebar, shows you all of the available things pretty easily. Maybe I also want my entity ID, which would be my product ID, right? So I'm saying, all right, for my entire site, show me the entity ID, the name, and the SKU for all of my products. And looking at our response, it's exactly what we're going to get. You'll notice the response is structured just like the request. We have site, products, edges, node, and then we have our entity ID, our name, and our SKU in that order. So predictable results, right? This is going to look exactly like what you asked for. Now, if you look over here on this side and you scroll down, I have maybe 7 or 8 products here. That's certainly not all of the products in my store. So you might be thinking, well, where are the rest of them? That's the second part to edges that we'll talk about in a second, the cursor part. Every one of these will have a cursor associated with it, and you can use these cursors to kind of filter through a big long list. We'll see that in a bit though. I just want to mention it in case you're wondering where the rest of my products are, but we'll get to it. So simple, easy query. Cool. Let's see some more examples of other queries. I'm going to kind of hop through here. Awesome. Some things that you query on will have multiple attributes or like sub attributes. For example, prices. There's a price, which is our default price. There's a sale price. There's a MSRP price, right? We have several different kinds of prices on a product. So sometimes you'll see something like this where it's asking for, further elaboration. I want prices, and I need for my default price, which is just, prices. And I want just my default price. And I want the value of it. And maybe I also want my sale price and the value of that as well. Right. And it'll bring me back just that. So sometimes you'll see things like this where there are multiple different kinds of prices. So you might have to elaborate a little bit. If you don't have a sale price, it'll say something like this: no, there's no sale price. That's okay. Cool. Other examples, here's some cool things you can do talking about aliases. Sometimes you may want to or need to rename what these things are called. For example, instead of entity ID, what if we called this product ID? That makes a little bit more sense to me. Or maybe you're using some sort of system where instead of calling it name, we want to call it title. You write an alias by just giving it the new thing that you want to call it with a colon, and then what it's actually called. That way, when it comes out over here, I'm going to get rid of prices just to keep this small. This is what it's called: product ID, title. So if you want to or need to rename some of these things, you're welcome to use an alias. Sometimes you'll have to rename them. If you're asking for the same thing twice, for example, if I'm asking for, let me see, I think we have an example of this in just a little bit, but let's say I'm asking for images and I want my images at a few different sizes. Remember, you can request at specific resolutions here. To ask for my image, I'm going to ask for my default image. And maybe I want this at a certain width. I want width is 200. And I want width is 400. I want a few different sizes of this, something like this. I'm asking for my default image at 3 different resolutions. It's going to throw me a little error. It's going to say, hey, there's a conflict because you have differing arguments. Use aliases on those fields to fetch both, if that was intentional. What this is saying is, hey, you're asking for the same thing. And if I hover over this, I can see the error. You're asking for the same thing 3 times. Use an alias here so that we know which one is which. So I could do something like this: URL 200 is this alias, maybe URL 400. So slightly different names, right? Oops. That should be okay. Here are my default images. Because I gave them aliases, I can kind of get around that error. So sometimes you're going to be required for aliases if you're asking for the same thing more than once. Other times you might just want to do it because it's personal preference, or it makes sense for you to rename it to something else. That's totally fine. Cool. While we're looking at images here, I think we have an example on this, but just to give you an idea, you can put a width in here. You can also put a height in here. It doesn't have to just be width. I could say, give this to me at square. I want 200 by 200. And you can see this in the URL too. Here's my 200 by 200. Here's my 400 width, 600 width. But you're welcome to request at, yeah, whatever resolution you need or want to. So pretty cool stuff. Let's see, what did I skip here? Aliases, category tree. Talking a little bit about the category tree. Looking at this example here, there's a couple of different things we see here. First and foremost, we're asking for category tree up top. I'll show you that in a second. But second, we've added some sort of range or some sort of filter on our products as well. We've said, hey, instead of show me all of my products, just show me the first two. So we're going to see a few different ways to kind of call out which products we want to work with. This is one way to do it. But let's take a look at our category tree. If we want to build this in, I'm going to get rid of my, actually, I'll leave that for a second. Let's do something like that example had. On products, instead of all of them, I'm going to say first two or first three, however many you want. And we can see this is already just going to send us back however many we asked for. There they are, my first two. If we want to also talk about category tree, we can do something like this. Is still within the site. We have multiple categories, a collection of categories, right? So this is still within the site section. And maybe I say name. I want all the name of my categories. Now, if I run this through, a couple of things I want to point out. One, we're asking for multiple resources in the same query. Remember, you can ask for several things in the same query. I could even go a step further and say, show me customer information. I want Ben's first name. So now I'm saying, hey, I want customer info, I want category info, I want product info, all within the same query, which is super awesome, right? Two, taking a specific look at this category tree, you might notice in your response, this is only showing me top level categories. If I take a look at my actual categories here, it's showing me these 5, but I have other categories. You know, I have all these nested ones, but I'm not seeing them here. If you want to see your full category tree, you use the children call and say, okay, I want my top level names and I want all the names of their children as well. That'll take you 2 layers deep. If you want to go another layer deep, I also want the children of my children. I want their name also, right? Going a 3rd layer deep. So as many layers as you need to go, you can build onto that tree. We do have an example of that up here. This category tree, we give it to you. This one uses fragments. We're going to talk about fragments in a second. But basically, these are just little puzzle pieces. Down here, we're saying, okay, this fragment has name, path, and entity. Instead of writing name, path, and entity for each one of these, we just create a fragment so it's easy to put in. We'll talk about fragments in a second. But we have an example of this here. If you ever want to come back to it or give it another try, it exists up there as an example. Cool. Let's see. Yep, something like that. Images. Yes, I got ahead of myself here. But exactly what we talked about earlier. I'm going to skip past a couple of these slides because we already saw the images. You can see, yeah, in the URL, you have your widths there. Yeah, if you're doing, that was very similar to what I did, right? Almost exactly. I just didn't have the PX on there. Using aliases if you need to. Skip past a few of those things. Let's see. Cool. Talking about customer specific information. Remember, you can request this on top of your other things that you're requesting, products and categories and whatever. This is a good call out though. If you're not signed in, you're just going to get null. It won't throw you an error. It's just trying to return to you the current session information. So if you're signed in, it'll show you that current customer information. If you don't have anyone signed in or this is on an anonymous session, it'll just say null. That's totally fine. So nice example there. Cool. Some of this stuff we've already seen, so I'm just going to skip over it for the sake of time. Yep, this is just a summary saying, hey, if you're going to do this with, yeah, the regular REST APIs and try and find customer pricing, you're going to be hitting price lists, catalog, customer, a bunch of different calls. Here you can simply just say, mutate to that customer and show me their price. It is so easy. Really nice. All right, let's talk about fragments for a second. This is a good example here. So fragments are, I like to think of them as little kind of like puzzle pieces. Fragments consist of three different components, if you will. The name, you can name this however you want. It's the unique name of the fragment. Each fragment has its own name. The type, so this is the type of object that this fragment's going to be used on. So we're using this fragment price fields on our price objects or our prices objects, right? And then the body, of course, this is defining what are we actually querying for, the fields that are going to be queried on. So if you look closely at this example, we actually have a couple of different fragments going on here. I'm going to start from the bottom and kind of build up. At the bottom, we have a fragment called money fields that runs on money objects, and we're asking for a value and currency code. Next step up, we have a fragment called price fields that runs on prices. And for our default price and our sale price, we're asking for money fields. The way we call that is 3 dots and then the name. So for our default price and our sale price, we're asking for the value and the currency code, right? Cool. And then we can feed this all the way back up into the top saying, here's our query. We want some customer information. We're looking for a very specific product. So this is another way to call products that we haven't seen yet. We're looking for product 77. And for product 77 on prices, run price fields, which of course is going to give us our value and our currency code for the default and the sale price. So these are kind of just little building blocks, right? Little puzzle pieces, little snippets that fit together. Why might you do this? Maybe you're running a few different queries for prices in different areas on the same template or within the same page, and you don't want to write a big, long, query. You want to be able to reuse these in other queries. That's where fragments kind of come into play. If you're going to request the same field several times, use fragments. It will just save you duplication on your code. Yep, cut down on your query complexity. Sweet. So we could do something like this if we want some practice in writing fragments. I think we could probably do something like this. I'm going to get rid of my category tree just to keep this small. I'm also going to get rid of my image. But let's recreate something like that. Let's say we want to do a fragment called money fields. I'm just going to create that exact example, and we can kind of look at it together. Money fields, on what type does it run on? It runs on money objects. And then here, what do we want with it? I think it was asking for value and currency code. I'm just going to put value. And above that, I'm also going to create a fragment called price fields on prices. And here, I'm going to say on my default price, run money fields. And on my sale price, run money fields, right? Cool. Then up in my actual product, I can say on prices, oops, run price fields. And it'll return to us exactly what we're asking for. So this is a nice way to do it instead of having to say up here, price, value, right? Sale price, value. Instead of having some big, long, gnarly query, we can just say, give me those price fields. So for reusable little fragments, not having to duplicate yourself or duplicate your code in the query. Cool. Let's see what else we got here. Ooh, this is a good one. Retrieving objects by URL. I mentioned this earlier, but this is a cool thing you can do. Let's say you're, just writing like a general script that's going to run on all of your pages. So it runs on everything, but you need it to do different things or ask for different things depending on what kind of page it's on. We use something like this, the root instead of products. Now we're looking up roots. We're looking up a URL. We're saying, here's our path. And then on that path, because we're not, we don't need edges here because we don't need cursors. This is not a list of things. We just are on one path. On that path, we want a few things. We want the type name, meaning what type of page is this? Would be category, right? For shop all. We want the ID over here. And then depending on what type of page this is, if it's a category, we want the name and description, which is what we're getting over here. But if it was a brand, we'd want something else. If it was a product, we'd want something else. Depends on what type of page it is. We have an example. I'm not going to write this full one out, but we have an example of this in the playground objects by URL. It looks like this. On category, give me these. On brands, give me these. On products, give me these. And then it has your root here. If you want to try this out, this variable, this URL path is down here. Oops, in query variables. I don't have a shop all, but I have an awesome shirt. So I'm saying, show me stuff for awesome shirt. And because awesome shirt is a product, it's still showing me my type name and my ID. Doesn't matter. Everything gets that. So I get product and ID. But because it's a product page, I get name, description, some sort of image. Name, description, some sort of image. So for general scripts, pretty cool way to do it. Syntax for this, triple dots, and then on product. Different from our fragments that are just triple dots and then name of the fragment. Here we're saying on this, show me these. So cool little thing you can do. Let's look at a few other things here. Let's see, get variant details about a product object. When you want to show a variant to someone, you typically don't care if there are, if the price was set by an adjuster or if it was just set on the variant level, or if the image changes because of an adjuster. You just want to show the price in the image. You don't really care about the logic in the back end, right? So the product node provides a variant ID, a SKU code, or a collection of options. And the response will return that version of the product, meaning if there is a different image or a different price, or if it's unavailable or something like that, then that's what gets reflected in the API response. So an example, there we go, of here it is. So this is an interesting example. This is asking for prices and dimensions and all kinds of things with fragments, but mostly up here, we're asking for a variant entity ID. We're saying, hey, here's our variant entity ID. Give us the prices for that variant, the dimensions for that variant. So specific to that entity ID. We're also asking to return to us the SKU. So an easy way to just say, hey, I want information about this variant. I don't really care about the rules or the adjusters. I just want you to show me the variant information and I'll take it from there, right? I think we have an example of this in the playground as well. Uh, let's see. I think it's this one, single variant, where my SKU equals something. I don't remember any of my variant SKUs here. Let me take a look at my awesome shirt real quick. I'll show you what this looks like. Variations. All right, here's a SKU. SKU RSM. Let's put that in. Oh, let's see. Unknown error. Where at? Site product. That looks right. Hold on 1 second. Maybe I did something funky. SKU RSM. Hmm, something funky here. Yeah, let me try something like this. I'm gonna put it just directly in here. I wonder if it's my, oops, query variable. And get rid of this. Nah, something funky's going on here. Maybe it has to do with my SKU. Could be that there's like no stock for it or something like that. Maybe it's out of stock. Let's try something like this. If this doesn't work, I'll move on. But there's probably something funky going on. Oh yeah, look, these are out of stock. There's probably something funky going on with my store settings. Remember, the API is reflective of how things behave in the store. So if I'm out of availability here, it's not available in the storefront either. Let's see if this works. Yeah, here we go. Easy fix there. So that was just saying, hey, we can't find that SKU. It's gone. And that's because it wasn't available. So funky little troubleshooting there, but got me around it. There's my SKU information. And of course, this is showing me my SKU pricing. So if my SKU is 1025, awesome. If my SKU is, let's change this to, $15. If there's a different image, whatever that might be, it's going to show me that information as soon as I save it. Cool. Let's try this out. Well, it's not updated yet. Sometimes it takes just a second. It's got a little hiccup right now. But normally, yeah, it would show you your actual SKU level pricing, of course. Cool. So asking for variant information, totally doable. Filtering by ID. So these are a couple of different ways to filter. We've seen a few of them already, but things like this, you can put in, we saw like first two. You can also give it a list, something like this. Give me these products where the entity IDs are these lists. This isn't a range. It's not saying from 93 to 94. It's a list of things. Show me 93 and 94, right? You can also look for a specific product like this. A couple of things change here. One, we're giving one specific ID. Two, products no longer has an S on it. And because it's not a list, you'll also notice we don't have edges and nodes. We only have, what are we asking for? We don't have to break it into or write our query in some sort of collection mode. We don't have a list of responses coming back. It's just for this product, so we can skip over edges and nodes and just ask for what we want here. Cool. Here's another example. If you were asking for multiple products this way, as opposed to doing it this way, where you could have a list, right? You could write it like this. I want 93 and 94, edges and nodes, name and entity. You could also do it like this. I want product 93, name, product 94, name, and use a fragment maybe to ask for, all of the things that you want. They're using an alias here, of course, for the same reason that we used it with our images. This example is requesting products twice. So it would throw you an error and say, hey, we don't know how to differentiate these. Please use an alias here. So a couple different ways, two different ways to do that. Cool. A couple of extra bits here, and then we will talk about some scenarios, and then we'll take our last little break. Types and subtypes, this is talking about usually like options. Everything has a type name. Don't get me wrong on that. But if we're talking about subtypes, we're usually talking about versions of something. For example, let me see. I think I have an example here. Yes. This is an example of asking about product options. Oops. Product options here. So we're saying, hey, show me this number, this product 77, because even though we're only asking for one product, we're still asking for products plural. So we need edges and nodes. We're asking for name. We want our options. And because there might be multiple options, we're also asking for edges and nodes. Anytime it's a plural, we're asking for edges and nodes. And we're saying for all of our options, show me the display name and the type that it is. So over here, we've got some sort of towel, and it's showing me the name of the towel. And then for my options, it's showing me the display name and the type. So both of these types, our size and our color, are both multiple choice option. But multiple choice is not as descriptive as maybe we need. There's a lot of different multiple choice types. This could be color swatches. That's multiple choice. It could be rectangles, right? It could be radio buttons. So there's a number of types of multiple choice. So our type name for our options would be multiple choice. Taking it a step further, adding this little bit saying, show me the display name, show me the type. And if it's multiple choice, coming down here, show me the label. So for all of my multiple choice values, remember, anytime with an S, we're asking for edges and nodes. For all of my values, show me the label. So this is asking for a label. Now taking this even further, let me give you an example of a swatch. We're saying, hey, show me the display name, the type. If it's multiple choice, show me the label. And if that type of multiple choice is a swatch, show me the hex color. So digging down even further into what type is this, what subtype is it, and what value is available for me here. So my playback of this is going to be, yep, display name is color. The type is multiple choice. It's showing me my labels. And then it's also showing me my hex colors because we're saying, hey, if it's a swatch, show me the hex colors. And because it is a swatch, it's showing me the hex colors, right? So really, really, really nitty gritty stuff here. Getting down as far as we need to in terms of details about options and variants, and not really caring about how this was set up on the back end, but just trying to grab the things that we need. Cool. So with respect to that node part, you can kind of see how, these nodes or this node, the display name, or even this node, the name of the product, the nodes are what we use to build out our PDP page. Comparing to the product detail page, you can see the option details on the product detail page are exactly the details that you get back from the API, right? So it's very reflective of what's actually going on. So you can imagine how we could take this sort of response and maybe build this page if we wanted to in React, or bring this experience into the category or something like that. But in takeaway here is the product node acts like the equivalent or the same as the interaction on the product detail page. What are we seeing on the PDP? That's what's coming back in our node here. So we're all familiar, just to kind of dig into this a little bit further. We're familiar with the process of clicking on an option, and once we click on medium or blue or whatever it is here, the page refreshes, maybe the image changes, the price changes, whatever rules we have set up works, right? The way that this works today is basically you run a different API request to get what's different about the product. The price is different, the image is different, right? And then there's a bunch of code in the storefront that combines on top of that existing information. It's complex, it's not very friendly. With GraphQL, you can just request a product and essentially assume that the user has clicked on some sort of combination of these options. And then you just request a product again with that configuration or a different one. So it's just one call. We don't have to worry about all of the logics on the back end. It's just a lot simpler, a lot easier, a lot nicer, and a lot faster. Cool. Why is this convenient? For all of those reasons: simpler, faster, nicer, easier, right? We just want to collect input from the user, send it back to the API, and then refresh the whole page. We don't really care about the rules or the logic behind it. You don't have to interpret any of that stuff. You just say, hey, I want this version of the product, and it sends it right to you. It's so nice. Cool. Last couple things, then we'll take our last break. Talking about meta fields, I want to remind you that meta fields are not existent in the admin panel, and they're not usually seen on the storefront, except with GraphQL, right? I think I mentioned this on Monday, but if you have meta fields, either on products, variants, categories, or brands, those are the 4 things that can have meta fields. As long as they have the right permission set, you can access them with GraphQL. So they have to be that either read and SF storefront access or write and storefront access. And as long as they do have that, they're accessible here. So I think I have an example. Yeah, cool. Here's an example. This is a long example, but it's actually just showing you 4 smaller examples. This one here is requesting meta fields on a product. This is on variants. This is on brands, and this is on categories. So those are the 4 things you can have meta fields on. And this is just an example of each of those. If you're requesting for a meta field, the namespace is required. So you have to include the namespace. What is the name of the meta field? It's recommended to supply a list of keys, but you don't have to. The namespace is required though. And then in the node is where you can grab your actual key value pair if you want to, or if you need to. So you can request it here as long as it has that right permission set, and then you can use it to post on the front end if you need to. Cool. All right, last thing I want to talk about is inventory, then we'll take a break, and we'll come back and finish strong. So talking a little bit about inventory with GraphQL, you might have noticed a second ago, one of my variants was out of inventory or it didn't have any inventory and it wasn't showing. GraphQL is reflective of what kind of inventory settings you have. So if your settings are set to, hey, don't show products when they're out of stock, then when they're out of stock, GraphQL won't see them. It won't be able to show them. But you can grab inventory on 2 different levels. You can grab it at the product level, or you can grab it at the variant level. On the product level, if it's a simple product and it's not complex, it's just going to show you how much stock is there. If it's a complex product, that number is going to be the sum of all of your variants inventory, right? So you can request it at a product level. You can also request it at a variant level. And at a variant level, you can, request at a very specific SKU and say, how much stock do I have in this small red shirt, right? But this is all assuming that you have your settings set to show your products whenever they're in stock, and they actually are in stock. Cool. Here's an example of requesting stock both at a product level here and at a variant level. Taking a look into here, we're asking for inventory. And then what we see in inventory is in stock. That's a Boolean. True or false? Is it in stock? Yes or no? Has variant inventory. True or false? Are we tracking inventory on a variant level? You don't have to track inventory on a variant level. You can just track it on the product if you want. So this is saying, okay, does it have inventory? Yes. Are we tracking on the variant level? Yes. Right. And then in the aggregated, how much stock is there and what's the low stock level? So we have a low stock level here, or if it's on the variant level, there's a low stock level here, right? So is it in stock? Are we tracking on the variant level? How much is available and what's the warning level? And then on a variant level, you can ask the same things. How much is available and what's the warning level? So finding inventory at a couple different levels here. All right, let's pause here for now. Let's take our last little break. I know I've been kind of just hitting you with a lot of information the past hour. So let's take our last break. When we come back, there's a few scenarios to run here, and then we'll talk about complexity, and then we'll wrap up for the day and look at the exam. So let's do